Hey guys, tonight we're drifting slowly down the Nile, floating on waters that have carried ancient secrets and royal processions for thousands of years. Picture the sun sinking low in the sky, casting golden rays that dance on the rivers. Surface like a slow-moving symphony. The gentle breeze brushes past your face, and you're on a wooden boat, the hull creaking beneath you. As you glide through time back to the days of ancient Egypt. Now, you probably won't survive this trip unless you've got an affinity for enduring the heat, crocodiles, and the occasional dust storm, but it'll be worth it, trust me. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world, so leave me a comment. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you rest on the boat, feeling the sun's warmth still hanging in the air, the rhythmic flow of the river beneath you, you slowly start to take in your surroundings. There's a calmness here so deep, you almost feel as if you could drift off into sleep at any moment. You know you're in Egypt, of course, but it feels almost otherworldly. The world around you is ancient, built on a past so rich and intricate that it could fill lifetimes. As you float down the Nile, it's easy to forget that this river has seen it all, the rise and fall of dynasties, the ambitions of mighty pharaohs, and the day-to-day of ordinary people. It has been a source of life, prosperity, and culture for millennia. Now, as you lay back, the breeze guiding your boat through the serene waters, you might feel a hint of curiosity about the grand processions of those who once ruled these lands. And that's where we begin. The Pharaoh's grand procession unfolds before your eyes. You can almost hear the muffled sound of drums in the distance, the rhythm announcing the arrival of royalty. The boat you're on glides past magnificent vessels, larger than any you've seen, adorned with gold, linen, and intricate woodwork. There's a sense of reverence as these boats carry not just the rulers, but the very heartbeat of Egypt, life, power, and immortality. On board, nobles and scribes write down the pharaoh's decrees, while the queen, draped in the finest robes, gestures to her people. You're no longer just a spectator, you're part of this spectacle, floating alongside an age that built the foundations of civilization. The grandeur of it all almost makes you forget the heat, the dry desert winds brushing against the Nile's edge. Historians still argue whether these royal parades were merely ceremonial or if they held deeper political significance, with the gods themselves witnessing the pharaoh's power. But either way, it's undeniable the image of that procession sticks with you, the luxurious vessels drifting slowly across the Nile's broad expanse, the scent of incense in the air. As you continue downriver, a familiar sight comes into view. The temple of Karnak, standing tall in the distance. It is a testament to the Egyptians' ingenuity and devotion to their gods. The colossal stone columns and towering obelisks seem to stretch beyond the horizon. You could spend days exploring this magnificent temple complex. Carvings of gods, kings, and sacred rituals are etched into every wall, each telling a different story of Egypt's glorious past. But for now, the temple remains a distant, awe-inspiring silhouette, its enormity making you feel small, as if you were nothing more than a grain of sand in the vast desert that surrounds it. The temple was built over several centuries, and today, it stands as one of the largest religious complexes ever constructed. Historians still debate how exactly such large structures were built with the technology available at the time. Was its sheer manpower, Or did they possess some ancient secret? It's one of those enduring mysteries of Egypt that continues to captivate the imagination. The waters continue to guide you downriver, and now you start to understand the true role of the Nile in shaping this civilization. The river is not just a source of water, it is life itself. As you drift past farms and villages on either bank, you see how the Egyptians have worked in harmony with the river for millennia. Fields of wheat, barley, and flax stretch out, their green hues a stark contrast to the sandy desert surrounding them. The annual flooding of the Nile was not just a natural event, it was a gift from the gods. It provided fertile soil for crops, making Egypt one of the most productive civilizations in the ancient world. The Egyptians built irrigation systems to harness the river's power, ensuring their survival year after year. In fact, much of their religion and rituals were centered around the Nile, as it symbolized not only life, but also death and rebirth. As you look around, the land is lush, fertile, but for all the benefits the Nile provided, the people here faced constant challenges. Historians still argue whether the early Egyptians believed the river was divinely controlled, or whether they had already figured out its natural cycles. Either way, it was central to everything: farming, commerce, religion, and the very survival of their society. Your boat continues to drift, and soon something catches your eye. A massive statue looms on the horizon, a sphinx, guarding the river like an ancient sentinel. Its half-human, half-lion form casts an imposing shadow, the sun casting long lines of darkness across the stone. You've heard of these creatures, of course, but seeing one up close is a different experience altogether. Its presence seems to breathe life into the scene, making the air heavy with the weight of history. The Sphinx was more than just a statue. It was a symbol of power, protection, and divine authority. For centuries, the Egyptians believed that the Sphinx stood watch over the pharaohs, guiding them through life and into the afterlife. Some even argued that it was meant to protect the Great Pyramids, guarding the resting place of the kings. You've likely heard of the Great Sphinx of Giza, but this moment is yours alone. Floating peacefully past one of these majestic creatures, feeling the awe and reverence they inspired in the Egyptians. Your boat drifts closer to the riverbanks, where you catch a glimpse of daily life in ancient Egypt. The villagers you pass go about their business, grinding grain, weaving cloth, or tending to cattle. They seem almost oblivious to the vastness of history unfolding around them. It's as though life here has remained constant for thousands of years. Yet, you can't help but wonder about the lives of these people. What was it like to live in ancient Egypt, to work the fields, or to craft the beautiful pottery you now see lining the banks? Historians still argue whether the lives of these common folk were filled with hardship or if they enjoyed a certain kind of stability unknown to us today. The truth is, Egypt was a land of extreme immense wealth for the elite and grueling labor for the masses. But, amid the hardship, there was also beauty. The houses may have been simple, but the people's connection to the land, to the river, and to the gods was profound. As you float on, the sight of the Great Pyramids suddenly fills your view. Towering above you, they seem to rise up from the earth itself, as if reaching for the heavens. The pyramids are a world unto themselves, an ancient marvel that has stood the test of time. You can't help but be in awe of them, the sheer scale, the precision with which they were built, and the fact that they have remained intact for so long. They were not just tombs for the pharaohs, they were a means of ensuring their immortality. The ancient Egyptians believed that the pyramids were gateways to the afterlife, allowing the pharaohs to ascend to the realm of the gods. Historians still argue about the methods used to construct these monumental structures. Some say it was the work of thousands of laborers, while others suggest that they may have had a more advanced understanding of engineering than we give them credit for. And as the day wears on, the Nile grows quieter, the shadows longer, and the warmth of the sun begins to fade. You pass sacred temples dedicated to gods like Ra, Osiris, and Anubis. Their grandeur almost overwhelming. The Egyptians believed that these gods controlled every aspect of their lives, from the rising of the sun to the flow of the river. As you pass each monument, it becomes clear just how deeply religion permeated every part of Egyptian life. Some still argue about the exact nature of the Egyptian pantheon, whether the gods were metaphors for natural forces, or if they were truly divine beings who walked among humans. But as you float past these temples, the sense of reverence is palpable. The peaceful drift of the Nile continues, and soon you find yourself face to face with one of the most unexpected sights: a sacred Nile crocodile, basking lazily in the sun. In ancient Egypt, crocodiles were revered as symbols of strength and protection. They were associated with the god Sobek, who was believed to control the waters of the Nile and protect the land from chaos. Some Egyptians even kept crocodiles as pets, and their mummified remains have been found in tombs. Historians still debate whether crocodile worship was widespread or more localized. But one thing is clear: these creatures were not just feared, but deeply respected. As you drift past the crocodile, the gentle flow of the river continues, and the day starts to wind down. You feel a sense of tranquility as the final rays of sunlight bathe the land in a warm, golden glow. The journey you've just experienced through the grandeur of royal processions, past the awe-inspiring pyramids, and into the heart of daily life in ancient Egypt has been nothing short of extraordinary. But as the sun sets, you know it's time to leave this ancient world behind, to float back to your own time, carrying with you the echoes of a civilization that shaped the course of history. Asterisk. The setting sun casts long shadows over the landscape, the ripples of the Nile now shimmering like liquid gold beneath its fading light. As you continue your journey, the boat drifts effortlessly forward, the only sound being the soft lapping of the water against the hull. The pace is slow, deliberate, a perfect opportunity to take in everything around you, to let the serene atmosphere of ancient Egypt wash over you completely. You're floating in a world that's thousands of years old, a world where every stone, every monument, every tree holds a story waiting to be uncovered. And now, as the boat continues its glide down the river, you can't help but marvel at the sights ahead, especially the one looming just beyond the horizon, the majestic temple of Karnak. A sight so grand it takes your breath away. It stands tall against the desert sky, an ancient testament to the Egyptians' devotion to their gods and the immense architectural prowess they possessed. You can see the towering columns in the distance, each one intricately decorated with carvings depicting the pharaohs, gods, and scenes of life from long ago. As you approach, the scale of the temple becomes apparent. This is not just a structure. It's an entire complex, spread out over 200 acres, designed to honor the gods and immortalize the kings who built it. It's hard to imagine that such a place was once bustling with priests, scribes, and worshippers, all gathering in this sacred space to offer sacrifices and prayers. The walls of the temple are adorned with detailed hieroglyphs, stories of divine births, military victories, and the daily rituals of Egyptian life. It's easy to get lost in the grandeur of Karnak, and as you float closer, you find yourself drawn to the towering obelisks that rise like giant fingers pointing toward the sky, as if trying to touch the gods themselves. The temple's history stretches back more than 2,000 years, and it was expanded upon by many of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, including Ramses II. The pharaoh whose name is forever linked to monumental architecture. Historians still debate the techniques the ancient Egyptians used to construct such vast structures, but many agree that their mastery of engineering, combined with sheer human ingenuity, made it possible. It's not just the size that impresses, but the precision with which these monuments were built. You can almost hear the echoes of the priests and builders who once walked these halls, their chants mingling with the sounds of the Nile. As you float past the temple, you can't help but wonder about the religious significance of this place, how the Egyptians saw the gods not as distant beings, but as present, active forces in their daily lives. In a way, the temple itself becomes a bridge between the mortal and divine worlds. And as the boat moves further downstream, the weight of this sacred place settles in, filling you with a sense of awe. Continuing down the river, the landscape shifts subtly as you begin to pass through the heart of Egypt's agricultural lands. The Nile, as central as it is to Egypt's survival, is surrounded by fields of crops, the rich, fertile soil a result of the river's annual flooding. The Egyptians understood the power of the river and built elaborate systems to control its flow, using irrigation to water their fields and ensure that crops like wheat, barley, and flax would grow in abundance. You can see farmers at work, their hands moving in a rhythm that has existed for millennia. They are harvesting, plowing, and sowing seeds, their lives intricately tied to the river that sustains them. It's almost like a dance man and nature, working in unison, the cycle of life and death playing out year after year. The fields are lush, green an oasis in the midst of a desert that stretches endlessly beyond the reach of the river's nourishing touch. The ancient Egyptians were keenly aware of the importance of the Nile, and their entire civilization was built around it. They had a deep understanding of the river's cycles, the annual flood that brought life and abundance to the land, and the dry season that forced them to rely on their irrigation systems to maintain the crops. In fact, much of their religious life revolved around the Nile and its seasonal floods. The goddess Hopi, for instance, was worshipped as the personification of the Nile's inundation, the flood that brought with it the fertile silt that enriched the land. The flooding of the Nile was seen as a divine gift, and the Egyptians celebrated it with festivals and rituals that honored Hopi and the other gods who governed the river. Historians still debate the exact role the Nile played in shaping Egyptian religious practices, whether it was solely a symbol of life and renewal, or if the Egyptians saw it as a more complex entity, a force that could bring both blessings and destruction. Either way, there's no denying that the Nile was at the heart of Egyptian civilization, shaping everything from their agricultural practices to their beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife. As the boat moves forward, you feel a shift in the air, a sense of anticipation hanging over the journey. You're approaching one of the most iconic landmarks in all of Egypt, the Great Pyramids. Even from a distance, they seem to loom large, their towering structures cutting through the horizon like giant stone fingers. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu, is the largest of them all, standing at a staggering height of 481 feet. Its base covers an area large enough to fit several football fields. It's hard to comprehend just how massive these structures are, and even more difficult to imagine how they were built. Historians and archaeologists have spent centuries trying to unlock the secrets of the pyramids, but many questions remain unanswered. How did the ancient Egyptians transport the massive stones? What tools did they use to carve such precise shapes? And most intriguingly, how did they manage to align the pyramids so perfectly with the stars? Some believe that the construction of the pyramids was a feat of engineering that involved thousands of workers, while others suggest that the Egyptians may have had a more advanced understanding of mathematics and physics than we give them credit for. Historians still argue about these questions, and perhaps, like many mysteries of the ancient world, the truth will forever remain elusive. As you approach the base of the pyramids, the sheer scale of the structures becomes even more awe-inspiring. The stones, some weighing several tons, are stacked with such precision that it's hard to imagine how they were placed so perfectly. The Great Pyramid alone contains over 2 million stone blocks, and yet, despite the weight and size of each block, the pyramid structure is remarkably stable, having withstood the test of time for over 4,500 years. It's no wonder that the pyramids are considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. As you stand there, gazing up at the enormity of the pyramids, you can't help but feel a sense of reverence for the pharaohs who built them. These structures were not just tombs. They were a way for the pharaohs to secure their place in the afterlife, to ascend to the realm of the gods. The Egyptians believed that the pharaohs were divine beings, and the pyramids were their eternal resting places where their souls would continue to watch over Egypt and its people. It's a powerful thought, and as you continue your journey down the river, you carry with you the weight of this ancient legacy. As the boat drifts further down the Nile, you pass by sacred temples dedicated to the gods. You see the towering figures of Ra, the sun god, whose image is often depicted with a falcon's head and a disk of the sun above it. Ra was considered the king of the gods, the one who brought light and warmth to the world. Then there's Osiris, the god of the afterlife, whose image is usually portrayed as a mummified figure. Osiris was believed to judge the souls of the dead, ensuring that they would be granted entry into the afterlife if they were found worthy. And of course, Anubis, the god of embalming and funerary practices, whose role was to guide souls through the underworld and into the afterlife. As you float past these monuments, you can't help but feel the deep sense of reverence the Egyptians had for their gods. Every temple, every statue, every ritual was a way of connecting with the divine, of ensuring that the gods would look favorably upon them in life and death. As you continue to drift down the river, the evening sky grows darker, and the stars begin to twinkle overhead. You've seen the grandeur of Egypt's monuments, the wealth and power of its pharaohs, and the devotion of its people. But now, as the day fades into night, you feel a sense of calm settling over you. The river, once bustling with life and activity, is now still and peaceful, the gentle current carrying you toward the horizon. The journey you've taken through the heart of Egypt's history, past its temples, its pyramids, its sacred places, been a journey of awe and wonder. And as the boat drifts slowly toward the horizon, you find yourself filled with a deep sense of peace, knowing that you've experienced something truly extraordinary. The serenity of the Nile now wraps around you like a comforting embrace, the evening's cool air a soft contrast to the heat of the day. The sky, once ablaze with the sun's fiery hues, has transitioned to a deep, velvety blue, and the stars, upon thousands, begin to twinkle overhead like scattered diamonds. As your boat glides through the still waters, The vastness of the Egyptian landscape stretches out before you, an endless panorama of temples, tombs, and vast fields of grain. The world around you feels ancient and changed by time, as though the river itself holds the memories of centuries gone by. Yet, despite the quiet and calm of the present, you know that Egypt's pulse still beats strong in the land, and the past is never far behind. The beauty of the scene is matched only by the deep sense of history that hums beneath the surface. Of everything you see, as you continue your journey, it's hard to ignore the feeling that something momentous is on the horizon, something that will deepen your connection to this timeless land. And as if on cue, a distant figure emerges from the darkness ahead, standing at the edge of the river. At first, it appears as nothing more than a shadow, but as the boat drifts closer, it becomes clear as Sphinx, its massive stone form sitting proudly, guarding the riverbanks. This is not just any Sphinx, however. It's a figure that embodies both power and mystery, the protector of Egypt's sacred land, a creature of legend whose name has passed through millennia. The Sphinx was more than just a statue. It was the manifestation of divine strength, its half-lion, half-human form meant to strike fear into the hearts of any would-be invaders. In fact, the Great Sphinx of Giza, the largest and most famous, was originally carved from a single piece of limestone, and historians still argue about its purpose. Was it intended to represent the sun god Ra, or was it a symbol of the pharaoh's royal power, watching over the pyramids? Some believe it was a guardian for the dead, ensuring that the souls of the pharaohs would pass safely into the afterlife. Whatever the reason, standing before the Sphinx, you can feel the weight of its centuries-long watch, and for a moment, it seems as though time itself has paused, as your boat floats silently past the majestic stone creature. You find yourself contemplating the meaning of such symbols in ancient Egypt. Everything here is imbued with symbolism, from the smallest amulet to the towering monuments. The Egyptians believed that the gods were present in everything, and their religion was deeply interwoven with the land itself. Even the animals that roamed the Nile, crocodiles, lions, and ibises, were revered as divine beings, each one embodying an aspect of the gods. It wasn't just about worship. It was about maintaining balance with the divine, ensuring that the gods were pleased and that the land remained fertile, the crops bountiful, and the Nile's waters in flood. It was a deeply spiritual and practical worldview, one that placed great importance on ritual, respect, and the cyclical nature of life. The very earth you're floating on, the sand that clings to the banks, the stones of the monuments you've passed, they're all part of a larger divine order that stretches back to the very dawn of civilization. The boat continues to drift downstream, and as it does, you pass by the agricultural heartland of ancient Egypt. The lush fields of wheat and barley stretch out before you, nourished by the rich, fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile. Here, the land is at its most vibrant, an emerald expanse that seems to go on forever, interrupted only by the occasional farmstead or cluster of palm trees. It's in these fields that the labor of the Egyptian people takes place, a labor that has sustained this civilization for millennia. It's easy to romanticize Egypt's grandeur, the pyramids, the temples, the royal tombs. But the truth is, much of Egypt's strength came from its farmers, laborers, and craftsmen, who worked tirelessly to feed the population and build the monuments that have become symbols of Egypt's greatness. These everyday Egyptians lived in villages along the river, their lives shaped by the rise and fall of the Nile's waters. Historians still argue whether life for these common folk was as harsh as we imagine, or if, in some ways, It was a stable and predictable existence, governed by the rhythms of nature. The land's fertility was a blessing, but it also came with its own set of challenges, particularly the need for constant irrigation and the management of floodwaters. Yet, it's undeniable that the river provided the foundation upon which Egypt's mighty civilization was built. As the boat drifts farther down the river, you can't help but notice the growing number of temples that line the banks. Each one stands as a testament to the Egyptians' devotion to their gods, built with the sweat and labor of countless workers. You pass by one such temple, its stone columns towering high into the night sky, illuminated by the soft glow of torchlight. The temple's walls are covered in intricate carvings and hieroglyphs, depicting scenes of gods, pharaohs, and rituals that date back thousands of years. You can almost hear the chants of the priests, the rhythm of their prayers rising into the night air. The Egyptians believed that these temples were sacred spaces where the gods could descend to interact with the mortal world. It was here that sacrifices were made, offerings of food, incense, and gold were presented, and prayers were uttered to ensure the continued favor of the gods. The temple you pass is dedicated to the god Amen, one of Egypt's most important deities, worshipped as the king of the gods. Amen's power was believed to be immense, his influence stretching over all of Egypt and even beyond. It's easy to imagine the grandeur of these temples, in their prime filled with worshippers, priests, and scholars, all engaged in rituals meant to honor the gods and maintain the cosmic order. As you continue on, you begin to see the faint outline of a city in the distance, Thebes, the ancient capital of Egypt, though it's nothing more than a silhouette. Now you know it once rivaled Cairo in its splendor. Thebes was the center of Egypt's political and religious life, home to the great temple of Karnak and the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs and nobles were laid to rest in elaborate tombs. The city was a place of great wealth and power, the seat of Egypt's rulers and the heart of the country's intellectual and artistic achievements. The pharaohs who ruled from Thebes were known for their military conquests, their monumental building projects, and their devotion to the gods. It was here that the famous pharaohs, like Ramses II and Hatshepsut, made their mark on history, leaving behind monuments and inscriptions that still inspire awe today. Thebes was also a place of learning, home to scholars and scribes who wrote down the stories of Egypt's past, preserving them for future generations. It's no wonder that the city is often referred to as the City of 100 Gates, a symbol of its wealth, grandeur, and importance. As you float down the Nile, you can almost feel the pulse of this ancient metropolis, the heart of Egypt's civilization. And as you approach the heart of Thebes, the boat begins to slow, the rhythmic motion of the oars coming to a halt as the darkness of night deepens around you. The river is quiet now, the only sound the gentle lap of water against the boat's hull. The sky above is a blanket of stars, and the moon casts a soft, silvery glow over the landscape, bathing the riverbanks. In an ethereal light, the boat, having drifted far from its starting point, now feels like a time machine, carrying you through the centuries as you float past the ancient landmarks of a civilization that has long since passed, but whose legacy lives on. Egypt, the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and gods, is a place of eternal wonder, and as the night deepens, you feel a deep sense of connection to it all. The Nile's waters have carried you through time and space, past the grandest monuments and the most humble villages, and now, as the journey draws to a close, you are left with the lingering sense that this world, this ancient mystical Egypt, still alive, still echoing through the sands of time. As the night deepens, you begin to realize just how immense the scope of Egypt's history truly is. The stars above seem to stretch on forever, as though the night sky itself is a reflection of the endless stories that have unfolded on this land. Egypt's past is not just written in its monuments or its temples, but in the very earth beneath your feet, in the rivers that flow steadily by, in the grains of sand that drift across the desert. Each ripple in the water, each stone that rises above the riverbank, carries with it the weight of centuries of knowledge, of culture, of civilization. The boat continues to glide through the river, and as you float, it feels as though you're moving not just through space, but through time itself, carried by the currents that have shaped Egypt for millennia. Every landmark you pass, every temple, every village, every monument, is a reminder of how deeply interconnected the people of Egypt were with the land, the river, and the divine forces they believed governed all things. Floating past the sprawling agricultural lands, you take a moment to reflect on the profound relationship between the Egyptians and their environment. The land, lush and fertile thanks to the annual flooding of the Nile, is almost like an extension of the river itself. The river was more than just a source of water. It was the very lifeblood of Egyptian civilization. As the floodwaters receded, each year they left behind rich, dark soil that nourished crops and fed an entire civilization. Wheat, barley, and flax were the staples of Egyptian agriculture. But it was the land's ability to renew itself with the floods that allowed Egypt to thrive for thousands of years. The flood was more than just a natural event. It was a manifestation of divine favor, a gift from the gods that ensured the prosperity of the land. Without the Nile, Egypt would not have existed as it did. This sacred river not only provided for the people's material needs, but also shaped their worldview and religious beliefs. As you float along the water, you can almost feel the connection to this eternal cycle, the rise and fall of the waters, the sowing of seeds, the harvest, and then the renewal. The Egyptians were deeply aware of their dependence on the Nile, and this connection influenced every aspect of their culture. Their gods were intimately tied to the forces of nature, and the gods of the Nile, like Hopi, the god of the annual flooding, were revered and honored for their life-giving powers. The Egyptians believed that maintaining harmony with the natural world was essential for prosperity and survival. Offerings were made to the gods, rituals were performed, and temples were built as a way to express gratitude for the gifts of the river. But more than that, the Egyptians saw themselves as the guardians of this delicate balance between the divine and the mortal, between life and death, between the gods and the natural world. In a way, they believed that their actions in the physical world could influence the gods, that they had the power to maintain harmony or disrupt it. Historians still debate the extent to which Egyptians believed they could influence the gods through ritual and action. But there is no doubt that the relationship between the divine and the mortal was deeply intertwined in their culture. As you float down the Nile, you can almost hear the soft chants of the priests who performed these rituals, offering their prayers to the gods in the hopes of ensuring another year of abundance. The boat continues its slow journey, and soon you find yourself floating past one of the most famous sites in all of Egypt, the Valley of the Kings. Here, nestled in the rocky hills just outside Thebes, lies the final resting place of many of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, including Ramses II, one of the most celebrated rulers in Egyptian history. The Valley of the Kings is a place of quiet reverence, a place where the dead are honored and remembered. The tombs carved into the rock are masterpieces of architecture and artistry, filled with intricate paintings, carvings, and hieroglyphs that tell the stories of the pharaohs' lives and deaths. These tombs were designed not just as burial sites, but as gateways to the afterlife, ensuring that the pharaohs would be able to continue their rule in the next world. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a transition to another realm, a realm where the soul could continue to exist and enjoy the same pleasures and comforts it had in life. The tombs were filled with treasures, food, and offerings to ensure the pharaoh's comfort in the afterlife, as well as provisions for the journey through the underworld. The walls of the tombs were adorned with scenes depicting the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife, where he would be judged by Osiris, the god of the dead, and would pass through trials to be granted eternal life. As you float past the Valley of the Kings, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe at the scale and grandeur of these tombs. They are silent reminders of the Egyptians' deeply held belief in the afterlife and the importance of securing a place in it. The tombs are not just places of burial, they are sanctuaries, temples of death and rebirth. The pharaohs, as divine rulers, were believed to be the intermediaries between the gods and the people, and their tombs were designed to reflect this status. The elaborate carvings and paintings inside the tombs were meant to ensure that the pharaohs would be able to communicate with the gods in the afterlife, continuing their role as rulers in the next world. The wealth and beauty of the tombs speak to the importance the Egyptians placed on the afterlife and the immense effort that went into preparing for it. For the Egyptians, death was not something to be feared, but a natural part of life, a continuation of the soul's journey. As you float past the Valley of the Kings, the quiet of the tombs feels almost sacred, as though the very air holds the weight of millennia of history. As the boat continues downstream, you are reminded of the timelessness of Egypt itself, the landscape, the temples. The tombs all are silent witnesses to the greatness of a civilization that lasted for over 3,000 years. Yet, despite the passing of time, Egypt's influence endures. The monuments you've seen, the stories you've heard, and the myths that have been passed down through generations continue to shape the way we understand the ancient world. Even today, the allure of Egypt remains strong, its mysteries and wonders still captivating our imagination. The grandeur of the pyramids, the beauty of the temples, the wisdom of the pharaohs, these are just a few of the many legacies that Egypt has left behind. But perhaps the greatest legacy of all is the river itself, the Nile, which continues to flow as it always has, carrying the memory of ancient Egypt into the present and beyond. As the boat continues its journey down the river, you begin to feel a deep sense of peace, a sense of being at one with this ancient land. The world around you is timeless, and for a moment you are transported back to the days of the pharaohs, walking in the footsteps of those who shaped the course of history. The sun is setting now, casting a warm glow over the river, and the world seems to slow down, as if the very fabric of time is stretching out before you. The Nile, once the lifeblood of an ancient civilization, continues to flow, carrying with it the stories of Egypt's past and its eternal place in the world's history. The boat drifts on, and as it does, you are reminded that this journey is just one of many. One chapter in the ongoing story of a civilization that will never truly be forgotten. As you continue down the Nile, the last rays of daylight dip below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the water. The air is cooler now, and the crickets along the riverbanks begin to chirp, their sound a soft chorus that accompanies your journey. The boat drifts effortlessly along, the motion almost hypnotic, as though the river itself is guiding you through an ancient, forgotten world. The grandeur of Egypt's monuments, the pyramids, the temples, the sphinxes, faded into the distance, but their presence lingers in the air. There's a weight to this land, a sense of time that stretches far beyond what we know. This isn't just a place on a map. It's a living memory, a place where the past never truly disappears. It's in the wind, the water, the earth beneath your feet, and it's this connection that makes Egypt so uniquely powerful, so eternally fascinating. As the boat continues its journey, you feel a deepening sense of reverence. It's not just for the monumental architecture or the spectacular history of the pharaohs, but for the people who lived here, people who, like you, once floated on the same river, watched the same stars, and felt the same rhythms of life. These people who built a civilization that still captures our imaginations were not so different from us. They struggled, they thrived, they dreamed, and they created something that would echo through the ages. Yet, even as their lives were bound to the land and the river, the Egyptians had a deep understanding that life was fleeting, that nothing, not even the greatest monuments or the most powerful kings, could escape the passage of time, perhaps. That's why the afterlife was such a central focus in their culture. It was their way of ensuring that their legacy, their very existence, would continue beyond the inevitable. You think back to the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, those grand burial sites that were not just places of death, but also of resurrection. The Egyptians believed that death was simply another journey, one that would lead them to an eternity with the gods. It was a belief that infused their everyday lives with a sense of purpose and direction, a sense of immortality that transcended the physical world. The boat drifts past more villages now, smaller settlements that line the riverbank like dots. In the desert, the people here are less grand than the pharaohs, but their lives are no less meaningful. These are the farmers, the artisans, the laborers who built Egypt from the ground up. They don't have monuments made of stone to immortalize their names, but their contributions are no less significant. It's in their hands that Egypt's power lay, in the fields they worked, the pottery they shaped, the baskets they wove. You can see them in the distance now, hard at work in the fields, their silhouettes outlined against the fading light. The river has been their constant companion for centuries, and in a way, they are the true stewards of Egypt's legacy. Without them, there would be no pyramids, no temples, no pharaohs. It's their labor that sustained Egypt year after year, and it's their quiet, everyday contributions that have ensured the survival of this civilization's memory. As you pass by, a soft breeze carries the scent of the earth, the scent of crops being harvested, of the land coming to life under the watchful gaze of the river. The fields are green and lush, nourished by the yearly flood of the Nile, and the people move about their work with a rhythm that has been passed down for generations. Some of them are grinding grain, others are tending to livestock, and others still are weaving baskets or preparing food. There's a simplicity to it all, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the monuments you've seen, but it's a simplicity that carries its own kind of beauty. The Egyptians understood that life was about balance between the natural world, the gods, and the human experience. The river, the crops, the labor, they were all interconnected, each feeding the other, each sustaining the life of the community. And as you float past these villages, you realize that while the world may change, the fundamental needs of humanity remain the same. We work the land, we build, we create, and we hope to leave something behind that will outlast us. The sun has fully set now, and the boat continues its journey under the soft light of the moon. The river is a ribbon of silver, stretching out before you like a pathway leading into the unknown. There's a sense of peaceful solitude as you float along, the world around you growing quieter with each passing moment. In the distance, you can see the faint outline of another temple, its towering columns casting long shadows in the moonlight. It's a reminder that even as the day ends, Egypt's spiritual life continues. The temples, the monuments, the tombs, were not just places of worship or of burial, but spaces that connected the living to the divine. They were the meeting places between the mortal and the immortal, the physical and the spiritual. And as the boat moves forward, you can almost hear the soft whispers of prayers drifting from the temple, carried by the wind, offering thanks to the gods who watched over this land. You think about the gods for a moment, Osiris, Anubis, Hapi, and the way the Egyptians personified the forces of nature. The gods were not distant, aloof beings. They were intimately involved in the lives of the people. They controlled the flooding of the Nile, the growth of crops, the harvest of grain, and the cycles of life and death. The Egyptians believed that by honoring the gods and maintaining a balance with the natural world, they could ensure the prosperity of their land and the continuity of their civilization. It's a belief that resonates even today, the idea that there is a divine order to the world, a balance that must be maintained. Whether you see this order in religious terms or as a simple understanding of nature's cycles, it's a powerful reminder of our place in the world. The Egyptians, through their temples, their rituals, and their monuments, sought to ensure that the balance between the gods and the people was never disrupted. They believed that in doing so, they could achieve not just earthly prosperity, but eternal life. As the boat drifts on, the rhythm of the water, the creaking of the hull, and the whispers of the past blend together in a kind of lullaby, coaxing you into a state of calm. The world of ancient Egypt feels closer now, almost tangible, as though the ghosts of the past are walking beside you on this journey. You are no longer just a visitor. You are part of this land, part of its eternal story. The river flows on, carrying you through the history of a civilization that will never truly die. The pyramids may crumble, the temples may decay, but the memory of Egypt, like the Nile itself, will continue to flow forever. And as you float along the river, you realize that this is more than just a journey through history. It's a journey into the heart of what it means to be human, to seek connection, meaning, and immortality. The Egyptians may have believed that their souls would live on in the afterlife, but perhaps their true immortality lies in the legacy they left behind, the monuments, the art, the stories, and the wisdom that continue to inspire us today. The boat glides slowly through the water, the moonlight reflecting off the surface like a shimmering blanket. You feel a deep sense of peace, of being at one with this ancient land. As the current gently carries you forward, you know that your journey is far from over. Egypt's past is alive, and you are a part of it now, one more traveler on the eternal river, bound to the same currents that have shaped the course of history for thousands of years. The night has settled in completely now, a velvet darkness that drapes itself over the land like a heavy blanket. The boat continues to drift down the Nile, and you realize that you've entered a timeless space where the present and the past no longer seem to matter. There is only the river, the current, and the ancient land of Egypt stretching out before you. The shadows of the towering structures you've passed, temples, sphinxes, and tombs, are now just fleeting memories in the distance, but their presence still lingers in the air, thick with the echoes of the civilization that built them. Egypt, in all its ancient splendor, feels alive, almost as if it's breathing in rhythm with the river itself. The very air you breathe is filled with the stories of the past, and you can almost hear the whispers of the priests and builders who lived here so many centuries ago. As you float on, it becomes impossible to separate yourself from this ancient world. You are, in a sense, a part of it, carried by the same currents that once carried the boats of the pharaohs. The boat glides steadily forward, the water so smooth that it mirrors the stars above with perfect clarity. For a moment, it feels as though you are floating through a dream, a quiet, otherworldly dream where time no longer has any meaning. The only sounds are the soft creaking of the boat's hull and the gentle lapping of the water against the sides. The river, which has sustained life in Egypt for thousands of years, now feels like a lifeline to the past, a bridge between worlds. And as you move through the stillness, you can almost feel the presence of the ancient Egyptians around you, an invisible, ethereal connection to the people who once inhabited this land, whose lives and actions continue to shape the world today. In the distance, the faint outline of another monument catches your eye this time. The iconic silhouette of a temple rising against the night sky. The towering columns stand tall, even in the dark, like sentinels watching over the river, their surfaces carved with images of gods and pharaohs. As you draw closer, you realize that this is no ordinary temple. It's the Temple of Luxor, one of Egypt's most magnificent structures. Dedicated to the gods Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the temple was a center of worship, an architectural marvel that once glittered with gold and jewels. Built during the reign of Amenhotep III, with later additions by Ramses II, Luxor was one of the great religious hubs of ancient Egypt. Its halls were filled with priests and devotees who came to offer their prayers and sacrifices to the gods, ensuring that the divine favor would continue to flow, just as the river itself did. The temple was designed to represent the cosmic order, a place where the earthly and the divine met. And as you float past the temple, you feel a deep sense of awe, not just for the grandeur of the structure, but for the culture that built it, a culture that understood the importance of ritual, reverence, and connection with the divine. Luxor, like many other temples in Egypt, was not just a place of worship, but also a symbol of the power and prestige of the pharaohs. The temples were designed to showcase the greatness of the rulers who commissioned them, and the statues, carvings, and inscriptions that adorned their walls told the story of their military conquests, their divine right to rule, and their connection to the gods. The Egyptian pharaohs were believed to be gods on earth, intermediaries between the divine and the mortal, and the temples they built were not only places of religious devotion, but also monuments to their own immortality. Historians still argue about the true role of these temples, whether they were primarily places of worship, or whether they served as political symbols of the pharaohs' power. What is undeniable, however, is the profound impact these temples had on Egyptian society. They were places where the people could come together to honor their gods and the pharaohs who ruled them, creating a shared sense of identity and purpose that helped bind the society together. As you float past the Temple of Luxor, the boat moves into a different part of the Nile area that is less frequented by tourists, more remote and peaceful. Here, the land feels wilder, more untamed, as though it's still in the process of being shaped by the river's flow. You pass by small fishing villages, their mud brick homes clustered together along the banks. The people here live much as they have for centuries, farming, and living off the land that the river sustains. The simplicity of their lives stands in stark contrast to the grandeur of the monuments you've passed. But there is a quiet dignity to the way they live, a respect for the land and the river that is palpable. The Nile is not just a source of water for these people. It's everything. It's their food, their transport, their livelihood. It's the lifeblood of their existence, and they understand it in ways that those who live far from its shores never could. The river flows here as it always has, winding its way through the land, bringing both life and death in its wake. As you float past these villages, you can't help but feel a sense of connection to the people who have lived here for generations. People whose lives are intertwined with the river's course, just as they were in ancient times. The boat drifts quietly onward, the landscape around you ever shifting, but always beautiful in its timelessness. The moon rises higher in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the water and illuminating the distant hills. The Nile is calm now, its waters flowing with a steady rhythm that seems to match the heartbeat of the land itself. There's a peaceful stillness in the air, a quiet that settles deep in your bones. The world around you is ancient, but in this moment, it feels as though nothing has changed. The same river that once carried the pharaohs, the gods, and the builders of Egypt now carries you on your own journey through time. You are a part of this land, a small but vital part of the ongoing story of Egypt. And as the boat moves forward, you begin to understand something profound, that Egypt's greatness lies not just in its monuments, its pyramids, or its pharaohs, but in its people, in their connection to the land, to the river, and to the gods who watched over them. As the boat floats deeper into the night, the stars above shine brighter, and the ancient landscape around you seems to fade into the shadows, leaving only the sound of the river, the gentle sway of the boat, and the soft rhythm of your own breathing. The journey has been long, and yet it feels as though time has stretched out, as if the hours have passed in an instant. You realize that this journey, this experience, is not just about seeing the wonders of Egypt, it's about understanding them, about feeling the pulse of the land beneath your feet, about connecting with the past in a way that transcends mere observation. The pharaohs may be gone, the temples may have crumbled, but Egypt is still alive, still breathing, still flowing with the eternal rhythm of the Nile. And as you drift on, carried by the river, you realize that you too are part of this river, part of this ancient story that will never end, as long as the Nile continues to flow. The boat drifts onward, the water now carrying you gently forward into the unknown. The stars above shimmer brightly, and the world around you grows quieter. Still, Egypt, in all its glory and mystery, is waiting, and you, for this brief moment in time, are a part of it, floating through history on the timeless current of the Nile. As the boat continues to glide effortlessly down the Nile, you find yourself enveloped in the ancient energy of the river, its still waters reflecting the cosmos above. The night has deepened, and the stars shine brighter now, more vivid against the dark canvas of the sky. The boat's progress slows slightly as you near the iconic site of the Karnak temple complex, one of the largest and most awe-inspiring religious sites in ancient Egypt, built over a period of more than 2 millennia. The Karnak temple is a place where the gods and the pharaohs were believed to meet. As you float closer, you can almost feel the magnitude of the place's towering columns, its massive statues of gods and kings, its vast courtyards filled with incense and chanting priests. Karnak was not just a temple, it was the center of a city that thrived for centuries, the heartbeat of Thebes, where the grandest ceremonies took place. The complex was dedicated primarily to the god Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, whose divine power was said to have created the world and governed the forces of nature. His connection to the land was so profound that it was believed that the pharaohs themselves were his earthly representatives, chosen by the gods to maintain harmony and balance in the world. The air around you seems to hum with the memory of countless rituals, sacrifices, and prayers offered to this mighty god, and you realize that the history of Egypt is written in the walls of places like Karnak, its columns, its temples, and its statues, all testaments to the power of the gods and the pharaohs. The boat continues to inch closer to the temple, the towering columns beginning to loom above you like the ancient sentinels they are. As you approach, the vastness of Karnak begins to take shape. The great hypostyle hall, with its forest of massive columns, stands like a colossus against the night sky. Its intricately carved surfaces telling the story of the gods and pharaohs who once walked these halls. These columns are not just decorative, they were meant to invoke awe, to remind visitors of the power and divine nature of the gods. They were symbols of the unity between the gods, the pharaohs, and the people. The temple complex was constructed to be a physical manifestation of the cosmic order, the mat that the Egyptians believed governed the universe. It was a place where time and space were suspended, where the divine could be called upon to intervene in the mortal world. The Egyptians believed that the temples were not just buildings, but actual residences for the gods, places where the gods could descend to earth and interact with their human worshippers. In this way, the temples became the epicenter of Egyptian religious life, sacred space where the boundaries between the mortal and the divine were blurred. The boat drifts closer, and you can almost hear the sounds of ancient ceremonies taking place here, the chanting of priests, the clashing of cymbals, the scent of incense filling the air. The grandeur of Karnak, though now a ruin, still carries the weight of its former glory. As the boat passes by the temple, you turn your gaze to the west, where the Valley of the Queens lies just beyond the horizon. This was once the burial place for the wives of the pharaohs, a sacred and mysterious site where the queens were laid to rest in elaborate tombs. The Valley of the Queens is not as well known as the Valley of the Kings, but it holds its own share of secrets. The tombs here are often smaller and more intimate, but they are no less significant. The queens, who were seen as the earthly counterparts to the goddesses, were just as important as the pharaohs in the Egyptian belief system. Their role in ensuring the continuation of the divine order was just as crucial. As the boat drifts further down the river, you think about the lives of these women wives of kings, mothers of future rulers, and in many cases, powerful figures in their own right. Some of these queens were buried with immense treasures, their tombs filled with gold, jewels, and offerings to the gods. The tombs of the queens were designed to ensure that they would live on in the afterlife, just as the pharaohs did. The murals and carvings inside these tombs depicted the queens' lives, their roles in royal ceremonies, and their connection to the gods. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Valley of the Queens is the mystery that still surrounds it. Many of the tombs here have never been fully explored, and new discoveries continue to be made. The boat drifts silently past the valley, and for a brief moment, you can almost imagine the queens themselves watching over the land, their spirits still guarding the sacred tombs in the dark recesses of the valley. As the boat continues its journey, you begin to feel the pull of the Nile even more strongly. The river is not just a geographical feature, it is the lifeblood of Egypt, its very essence. The Egyptians' connection to the Nile was spiritual as much as it was practical. The river's annual flooding was seen as a manifestation of the god Hapi, the god of fertility and abundance. Every year, as the floodwaters rose, the Egyptians would offer prayers and sacrifices to Hapi, thanking him for the bountiful harvests that the floods would bring. It was believed that the river's floodwaters were the tears of Isis, mourning the death of her husband Osiris, and that the land was reborn each year as the waters receded. In a way, the river's flood was a symbol of death and rebirth, of the cyclical nature of life. The boat moves forward, the sound of the water becoming a soothing rhythm, a constant reminder that you are floating down a river that has been flowing for thousands of years, carrying with it the stories of ancient Egypt and the people who lived and died by its waters. The boat is now nearing another important site, the Temple of Abu Simbel, a massive complex built by Ramses II to honor himself and the gods. This temple, with its monumental statues of Ramses seated in eternal glory, has stood the test of time and weathered the centuries. The grandeur of the site is staggering, and the carvings on the walls tell the stories of Ramses' military victories, his divine heritage, and his devotion to the gods. The temple was designed not just as a monument to Ramses' power, but as a way of ensuring that his name would be remembered for eternity. Historians still debate the extent to which Ramses' building projects were meant to glorify him personally, but there is no doubt that his legacy was central to the temple's design. As the boat floats on, you begin to understand that Egypt's monuments were not just about honoring the gods or the pharaohs. They were also about immortality. The pharaohs built these structures as a way to ensure that they would never be forgotten, that their names would live on long after their deaths. The Temple of Abu Simbel, like the pyramids, was designed to be eternal, a place where the gods and the pharaohs could be remembered by future generations. As the boat nears its destination, the rhythm of the water begins to slow, and the world around you seems to quiet. The stars above twinkle faintly in the distance, and the land stretches out before you like an ancient tapestry woven with the stories of gods and men. The boat's journey is nearly complete, but as you approach the end, you realize that the history of Egypt is far from over. It continues to flow, as eternal and unchanging as the river itself. The monuments, the temples, the tombs, they may be crumbling, but the memory of Egypt will never fade. The river will continue to carry the stories of this ancient land from one generation to the next, for as long as the Nile flows. And as the boat drifts toward its final destination, you feel the deep, unbreakable connection to this land, this river, and this history. Egypt's story is your story now, and it will live on in the water, in the stones, and in the stars above. The boat continues down the river, its movements becoming increasingly slow, as though it is savoring the journey through the land of ancient wonders. The water around you reflects the stars above like a darkened mirror, a symbol of Egypt's profound connection to the heavens. It feels as if you're not just traveling through space, but through time itself, caught in a never-ending loop between the present and the past. The Nile, as ancient and unchanging as the land it nourishes, flows with a quiet purpose, carrying you through one of the most fascinating and enigmatic civilizations in history. The monuments, the temples, and the tombs may now lie in ruins, but their legacy, like the river itself, remains eternal. You've already passed the grand temples of Karnak and Luxor, their towering columns a testimony to Egypt's religious grandeur. But now, as the boat drifts past the ruins of ancient cities, you realize that there is something more profound about this river, something that goes beyond stone and mortar. It is the continuity of life, of culture, and of tradition that truly defines the Egyptian experience. A rhythm of existence that has persisted for thousands of years. The boat nears a more remote stretch of the river now, where the land feels untouched by time. The trees along the banks of the river grow dense here, their branches intertwined in a thick canopy that blocks out much of the light. It's an eerie, almost magical atmosphere, the air thick with the sense of damp earth and vegetation. The people here live in harmony with the land, farming the fertile soil that the river provides, and their lives are still guided by the same rhythms that governed the lives of their ancient ancestors. As the boat drifts forward, you see small clusters of homes made of mud brick, their rough exteriors standing in stark contrast to the beauty of the natural world that surrounds them. These villages are a world away from the grand temples and monumental tombs of Egypt's ancient past, yet they embody the very essence of Egyptian life, life sustained by the river and its annual cycle of flooding and renewal. The river's waters nourish the land and its people, much as it has for thousands of years, and you can't help but feel a deep sense of connection to the people here, whose ancestors worked this same land, worshipped these same gods, and followed the same path of life. The boat passes by another small settlement, this one a little more modern, with stone buildings rising along the banks. The people here are engaged in their daily routines, some of them tending to their crops, others fishing in the river, still others chatting in small groups. The scene feels peaceful, serene even, as though the world has slowed down just for a moment to let you take it all in. You realize that Egypt is not just a place of history, but a living, breathing country that has carried its ancient legacy into the present day. Despite the advances of modernity, the people of Egypt remain intimately connected to their past, and their culture continues to thrive in ways that are both visible and invisible. The ancient ways of life, the farming, the fishing, the reverence for the river continue to shape the modern world, blending seamlessly with the present. The temples, the pyramids, and the tombs may be relics of a bygone era, but the spirit of Egypt, the spirit that built these monumental structures, is still very much alive. The boat moves on, the sound of the water gently splashing against the hull. The moon has risen high now, casting a silvery light over the land and turning the river into a ribbon of liquid glass. The stars above seem to shine even brighter, their light reflecting in the water below. It's as though the entire world is holding its breath, waiting for something, and in that moment, you realize how small you are in the grand sweep of history. You are just one of many floating down this river that has witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The people who have lived along the Nile, from the ancient Egyptians to the modern-day villagers, have all been part of the same great story, carried forward by the same unbroken chain of life. The pharaohs, the gods, the priests, the workers, they all played their part in this grand narrative, and now so do you. The boat drifts on, the current steady beneath you, and you find yourself pondering the mysteries of Egypt, its people, its culture, and its land. What was it that made this civilization so enduring? What was it about the river, the desert, the temples, and the tombs that captured the imagination of the world, both in the past and today? As the boat continues its journey, it nears another stretch of the Nile, this one marked by a series of ancient ruins that once stood as symbols of Egypt's power and influence. You pass by what remains of temples dedicated to gods long forgotten by modern society, their once proud columns now reduced to crumbling fragments of stone. These ruins are a testament to the impermanence of human achievements, a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are not immune to the ravages of time. Yet, even as you gaze upon these ruins, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. The scale of these monuments, the artistry of the carvings, and the precision of the architecture speak to the incredible ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians. They were master builders, master planners, and master craftsmen, and their works have stood the test of time. These ruins may be broken, but they are far from forgotten. They continue to inspire, continue to teach us about the greatness of Egypt and the ingenuity of its people. And as the boat floats past, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the sounds of chisels against stone, the whispers of priests offering prayers, the footsteps of workers hauling massive stones into place. The boat moves on, and as it passes through the ruins, you are reminded of the deep spiritual connection the Egyptians had with their land. The temples, the statues, the tombs, all of them were constructed with one goal in mind: to honor the gods and ensure that the divine order would be maintained. The Egyptians believed that their kings, the pharaohs, were the living embodiments of the gods, and their role was to maintain harmony between the gods and the people. The temples were not just places of worship, they were sacred spaces where the divine could enter the mortal world, where the gods could be called upon to intervene in the affairs of men. The boat moves past another broken temple, its walls covered in carvings that tell the stories of the gods and the kings who once ruled over Egypt. The carvings are faded now, their lines worn away by centuries of wind and sand, but they still speak to you in the quiet language of history. As you drift along, you realize that the ruins you see are not just remnants of a long-dead civilization, they are pieces of a living history, a history that is still unfolding before your eyes. The boat continues down the Nile, the water now, carrying you deeper into the heart of Egypt. The land on either side of the river grows wilder, more untamed, as if the river itself is taking you back to a time when the world was still new, still filled with wonder and mystery. The monuments, the temples, and the tombs have faded into the background now, and what remains is the river, flowing steadily toward the horizon. You are no longer just a visitor in Egypt. You are part of its story, a small but significant thread in the vast tapestry of its history. The boat glides on, the water lapping gently at the sides, and you find yourself becoming part of the eternal rhythm of the Nile, a rhythm that has carried humanity forward for thousands of years. Asterisk. As the boat continues to drift on the river, the silence of the night deepens, filling the air with an almost tangible stillness. The river, with its timeless current, guides you forward as if drawing you further into Egypt's mystique, a place where the past and present blur into a single, eternal moment. The rhythmic flow of the water beneath you lulls you into a trance-like state, and for a moment, it feels as if time itself has come to a halt. You've passed grand temples and towering monuments, but as the boat moves down this stretch of the Nile, you're entering a quieter, less traveled part of Egypt, a place that holds a different kind of magic, a more subtle but equally profound history. The shores are less populated now, with only the occasional fishing village dotting the landscape, their thatched roofs and mud brick homes blending seamlessly into the earth, as if they too are part of the river's eternal story. These villages, far from the bustling cities of Luxor or Cairo, have lived much the same way for generations, their inhabitants still following the ancient traditions handed down from their ancestors. The farming, the fishing, The close-knit communities, they are as much a part of Egypt as the Grand Pyramids, for they carry the same rhythms, the same reverence for the land that sustains them. As you drift past these villages, the landscape opens up, revealing wide expanses of farmland stretching along the banks. The fields are lush and green, nourished by the river's annual floods, and you can almost feel the pulse of the land as the crops sway in the soft breeze. The ancient Egyptians understood the importance of agriculture, how the land could be coaxed into abundance through careful cultivation and respect for the natural cycles. The Nile's floods were seen as a gift from the gods, a divine blessing that brought life to the soil and ensured the prosperity of the land. It's hard to imagine that this cycle has been going on for thousands of years, and as you float past the fields, you realize that the life of the ancient Egyptians was intimately tied to the rhythm of the river and the land. The same crops that were grown in these fields, wheat, barley, and flax, sustained the people of ancient Egypt and provided the foundation for their civilization. The Egyptians were masters of agriculture, and their ability to harness the power of the Nile allowed them to build one of the greatest civilizations in history. Even today, as you float through the land, it's clear that the river still holds the power to shape life, to shape history, in ways that are almost magical. The boat drifts on, the water so still now that it almost feels like a mirror, reflecting the stars above with perfect clarity. The night air is cool and fresh, and there's a sense of peace that comes with the quiet, the solitude, and the sense of timelessness that surrounds you. The river is a silent witness to everything that has happened in Egypt, from the rise of the pharaohs to the fall of empires, from the building of the pyramids to the silent decay of long-forgotten monuments. The Nile has been the lifeblood of Egypt, a constant companion through the centuries, and as you float along its surface, it becomes impossible not to feel a deep connection to this ancient land, to the people who once walked here, and to the civilization they built. The temples and monuments you've seen may be decaying, but they are far from gone. They are still alive in the memories of the people who built them, and they are still alive in the way the river continues to shape the land as the boat continues its journey. The landscape begins to change again. The flat, fertile farmland gives way to rocky hillsides, their jagged edges rising sharply from the river. The change in scenery is striking, but it's a reminder that Egypt is not a single, homogeneous landscape. The country is as diverse as it is ancient, with deserts, valleys, mountains, and rivers all playing their part in shaping the civilization that rose from this land. The hills rise higher now, and as you float past, you feel a sense of awe at the scale of the landscape. These rocks, these hills, have witnessed millennia of history, the rise and fall of kings, the construction of great monuments, the ebb and flow of the Nile's floods. You wonder how many people have stood on these very hills, looking out over the river and wondering what the future would hold for Egypt. The rocks have watched it all, silently, stoically, and they will continue to watch. Long after the boat has passed by, and long after the people who sailed on it have vanished into history, the boat glides silently past a series of cliffs that line the river's banks, their surfaces covered in ancient carvings. These inscriptions, like the pyramids and the temples, are a way of preserving history, a way for the ancient Egyptians to ensure that their story would be told for generations to come. The carvings on the cliffs have faded now, their details worn away by centuries of wind and weather, but they still speak volumes about the culture that created them. Some of the images depict scenes of daily life, farming, hunting, and fishing, while others show gods, kings, and pharaohs in elaborate ceremonial settings. These carvings are not just art, they are history, captured in stone, preserved for eternity. As the boat floats past, you can almost hear the voices of the artists who chiseled these images into the rock. Each stroke of their tools, a declaration that Egypt's story would be immortal. And in a sense, they were right. Though the people who created these carvings are long gone, their work endures, and it continues to tell the story of Egypt to those who are willing to listen. The boat continues its journey. The sounds of the river and the occasional rustle of wind in the trees, the only sounds that break the silence. The landscape around you is becoming wilder, more untamed, as if you are moving into a part of Egypt that is less shaped by human hands and more shaped by the forces of nature. The hills rise higher now, and the river begins to twist and turn. More sharply, its current growing stronger as it flows toward the south. The air is cooler now, and you can feel the change in the atmosphere, as though the very land is shifting beneath you. You are far from the crowded cities and monuments, now deep in the heart of Egypt, where the ancient spirits of the land still linger. The journey has taken you through the history of Egypt, from the grand temples and tombs to the quiet rural villages that line the banks of the river. But now, as you move deeper into the heart of the country, you sense that the journey is taking on a more personal, intimate tone. You are no longer just an observer of Egypt's past. You are a part of it now, carried along by the same river that has sustained the people of Egypt for thousands of years. The river has no beginning or end, is a continuous flow, just like the history of Egypt itself, and as you float along, you realize that you are a small part of that endless current, a fleeting moment in the grand sweep of time, but a moment that will never be forgotten. The boat drifts on, the silence of the night deepening, and you feel the weight of history settle around you. The river flows steadily beneath you, its waters carrying you forward into the unknown. The stars above shine brighter now, and the land stretches out before you, vast and eternal, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The journey may be nearing its end, but Egypt's story, like the Nile itself, will continue to flow forever. The boat drifts deeper into the vastness of Egypt, the once quiet shores of the Nile now giving way to rugged, untamed landscapes. The current of the river has picked up pace, as if urging you to move forward, to follow the path it's carved. Through this ancient land, the night has fully embraced the world around you, and the air is thick with the scent of earth and water. There is a haunting stillness that surrounds you now, one that is both calming and awe-inspiring. As you look out across the water, the moon reflects off its surface in shimmering waves of silver, creating a luminous pathway that seems to stretch on endlessly. The silence is interrupted only by the soft lapping of the water against the sides of the boat, a sound so gentle it feels like a whisper from the past. It's as if the river itself is speaking, recounting the ancient stories that have been carried along its current for millennia. There's a deep connection between you and the water now, a bond that feels more intimate than any history lesson or textbook ever could. You realize that you're not just a visitor to this land, you've become part of its living story, and as the boat moves along, it's easy to imagine that this very spot, this stretch of the Nile, has borne witness to countless moments of human history. The rise of pharaohs, the whispers of priests, the cries of soldiers marching into battle. These moments, though long past, still echo in the air, and you can almost hear them as you float onward, drifting toward an unknown but inevitable destination. As the boat moves further into this less traveled stretch of the river, the landscape shifts yet again. The fertile banks of the Nile, where crops have been grown and villages have flourished, begin to fade into the distance. replaced by the harsh, arid terrain of the desert. The contrast between the lush green of the riverbanks and the barren, golden sands of the desert is stark, yet there is a certain beauty in it. The desert is a place of silence and solitude, a land that has borne witness to the ebb and flow of time, yet remains unchanged by it. The wind, cool and dry, picks up a little now, whispering across the sands, as though carrying with it the secrets of ancient travelers who crossed these very dunes centuries ago. Egypt's desert, like its river, holds its own mystery stelaes of nomads, warriors, and merchants who braved its vastness in search of something greater than themselves. The desert may be unforgiving, but it is also a place of reflection and contemplation, a place where the past and present blend into a quiet, eternal dance. You realize, as you watch the shifting sands, that Egypt is not just defined by its cities or its monuments, but by its vast, rugged landscapes, each one a part of the whole, each one a silent witness to the passage of time. The boat continues to float on, its steady motion guiding you through a landscape that feels increasingly isolated from the world. The distant hills, once so far away, now seem closer, as though they too are moving toward you. The land here is raw, unrefined, and you can feel the presence of the ancient gods in the wind, the water, and the stones. This is the part of Egypt that exists beyond the grandeur of the temples and the opulence of the pharaohs. This is the Egypt of the common people, the farmers, the traders, the laborers who lived their lives far from the royal courts, but whose contributions were just as vital to the country's survival. As you glide past these rugged hills, you imagine the lives of the people who lived in this desolate yet beautiful landscape. What did they think of the mighty pharaohs who ruled from the great cities, or the vast temples that dominated the landscape? Perhaps they never saw these grand monuments with their own eyes, but in some way their lives were just as connected to the river, to the land, and to the gods as the rulers who lived in luxury. The common people of Egypt were the lifeblood of the civilization, the ones who tilled the soil, harvested the crops, and kept the wheels of society turning. In this quiet part of Egypt, you feel the presence of those who came before you, those whose names are forgotten, but whose work still resonates in the very landscape. The boat's journey continues through this silent land, the silence broken only by the occasional flutter of wings overhead as birds skim the surface of the water, hunting for fish. It's a reminder that life continues here, even in the most remote corners of Egypt, where human footprints are few and far between. The river may pass through cities and temples, but it also winds its way through the wilderness, nourishing the land and sustaining all that lives along its banks. You begin to realize that this land, this river, is not just a backdrop to human history, is the very foundation of it. The people who built Egypt's temples, pyramids, and monuments did so not just out of ambition or reverence for the gods, but out of a deep understanding of the land and the river that shaped their world. Egypt's greatness lies not in its stone structures, but in the relationship between the people and their environment, a relationship that has endured for thousands of years and continues to thrive today. As the boat drifts forward, the water grows quieter, the movement slower. The stillness that surrounds you is almost profound, and it feels as though the world has paused, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. You realize that this stillness is not just a physical one, but a mental and spiritual pause, a moment of reflection in the midst of a journey through history. The silence is almost sacred, as if you've entered a space where time no longer matters, and the world exists only in this perfect, fragile moment. As the boat continues its quiet journey down the Nile, the world around you seems to fade away, and, for the first time, you feel a deep sense of belonging, not just to this boat or this river, but to Egypt itself. This land, with all its complexity, history, and mystery, is now a part of you. You are connected to it in ways you can't quite explain, as though the river has woven you into its fabric, pulling you deeper into its story. The Nile, which has witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, has become your guide, leading you through this ancient land, teaching you about the power of history, the passage of time, and the enduring spirit of Egypt. The boat nears another bend in the river, and as it does, the landscape begins to change once more. The vast desert gives way to more fertile ground, and the green of the riverbanks returns. The boat moves slowly now, almost as if reluctant to leave the quiet wilderness behind. The journey, which has felt like a long, slow passage through the heart of Egypt, is nearing its end. But as you float onward, you realize that this journey has been about more than just passing through the land. It's been about becoming part of it. Egypt, with all its monuments, gods, and mysteries, has welcomed you into its world, and now, as the boat begins to approach its final destination, you can't help but feel a sense of awe and gratitude for the journey you've shared with this ancient land. The Nile will continue to flow, the sands will continue to shift, and the history of Egypt will remain alive, carried forward by the river and its eternal current. Asterisk. The boat's journey continues, the Nile now flowing smoothly beneath the hull, its waters carrying you ever forward, toward a place where history, myth, and reality converge. The air is thick with the sounds of the night, the occasional chirp of crickets, the soft rustle of palm fronds as they sway in the breeze, and the distant croak of a frog hidden among the reeds. The silence is comforting, like the embrace of an ancient lullaby, coaxing you to let go of the modern world and sink deeper into the rhythms of the past. Egypt, as timeless as the river itself, feels alive in ways that words can hardly describe. As you float down the Nile, you feel a sense of belonging, as if you've been swept into a timeless current. No longer simply observing, but now experiencing the essence of this ancient land. The boat's gentle movement, the cool breeze on your skin, the soothing sound of the water. These sensations come together to create an almost ethereal atmosphere, where time seems to bend and stretch, leaving you caught between the ancient world and the present moment. The river, which has witnessed the rise and fall of kings and empires, now cradles you in its eternal flow, guiding you through a journey that feels both personal and universal. The land on either side of you is a patchwork of fertile soil and desert, evidence of the duality that defines Egypt: a lush, life-giving river on one hand, and the barren, unforgiving desert on the other. It is a land of contrasts, where the ancient and the modern coexist, where the whispers of the past seem to echo in the present. As the boat drifts onward, you find yourself reflecting on the paradox of Egypt, how it can be both a land of timeless beauty and a place of great change, how its culture, rooted in thousands of years of history, continues to influence the world. Today, the river that has carried you through this land, with its ancient waters and eternal flow, is the very lifeblood of Egypt, sustaining not only the people who live along its banks, but also the stories, the myths, and the history that have been passed down through generations. And in this moment, as you float through the night, it feels as though you, too, are becoming part of that eternal flow, becoming one with the river that has shaped Egypt's past and will continue to shape its future. As you near the southern reaches of the Nile, the landscape begins to change again. The lush riverbanks that have accompanied you thus far are replaced by the stark, jagged hills of Upper Egypt, their steep cliffs rising sharply from the water's edge. The desert, more fiercely here, its golden sands stretching out to meet the rocky terrain in a fierce embrace. The contrast between the fertile Nile and the barren desert is striking, and it's easy to see why the ancient Egyptians viewed the river as both a lifeline and a barrier. The Nile, flowing like a vein of life through the harsh desert, was the key to Egypt's survival, and its annual floodwaters were revered as a gift from the gods. As the boat moves through this remote stretch of the river, you can't help but feel the awe that the ancient Egyptians must have felt when they first gazed upon this landscape. It's a harsh, unforgiving place, yet there is a beauty to its wildness, a stark, untamed beauty that speaks to the resilience of life itself. The Nile, like a mother providing nourishment to her children, brings life to this otherwise desolate land. The people who lived here, whether they were farmers, traders, or soldiers, learned to adapt to the rhythms of the river, working with it rather than against it, using its waters to sustain their lives and their culture. The land around you is dotted with ancient ruins, remnants of a time when Egypt's rulers sought to conquer these wild, desolate lands. You pass by the remnants of fortresses built to defend Egypt's southern border, their walls crumbling, but still standing tall against the relentless passage of time. These ruins, like so many others scattered across Egypt, are silent witnesses to the battles fought, the alliances forged, and the kingdoms that rose and fell in this ancient land. The boat drifts on, and you realize that this river, which has carried you through Egypt's greatest cities, is now taking you into a more ancient, more primal part of the country where the wilderness still reigns, and the past is still alive. In the stones and the sands, the boat moves steadily on, the current flowing faster now, as though urging you to move toward the heart of Egypt. The land around you is more rugged, more untamed, and the Nile's banks seem to recede into the distance, leaving the river to snake its way through the desert like a lifeline between two worlds. The villages and towns that once dotted the river's shores are fewer and farther between now, and the people who live here are more isolated from the grand cities to the north. The life that sustains them is simple farming, fishing, and trade, but it is no less important than the grand rituals and ceremonies that took place in the great temples and palaces. These people, living in the shadow of the river, are just as much a part of Egypt's story as the pharaohs and the priests. They are the keepers of the land, the ones who tend to the crops, fish the waters, and ensure that Egypt's heart continues to beat. They are the pulse of the nation, and their work is no less important than the work of those who built the pyramids or carved the statues of the gods. As the boat moves deeper into this remote part of Egypt, you begin to feel a deeper connection to the land, to the river, and to the people who call it home. You realize that Egypt is not just a place of monuments and temples, but a land that is alive with the work and the spirit of its people, past and present. The river, which has carried you through the grand cities and monuments of Egypt, now takes you through a more intimate, personal landscape where history is not written in stone, but in the daily lives of the people who live and work along its banks. These people, whose names may never be recorded in the annals of history, are the true guardians of Egypt's legacy, the ones who keep the traditions alive, who pass on the stories, and who ensure that the culture of this ancient land continues to thrive. The boat glides forward, the current steady beneath it, and you find yourself lost in the quiet beauty of the river. The landscape is a mix of desert and fertile land, a place where life and death coexist in a delicate balance. The Nile, which sustains the people of Egypt, also carves through the land, shaping it and reshaping it with every flood. The river is the lifeblood of the country, and its annual flooding is both a blessing and a reminder of the power of nature. The people who live along its banks have learned to live in harmony with the river, adapting to its rhythms and using its power to their advantage. The river is both a source of life and a force of nature that must be respected. And as you float along, you realize that the river is not just a geographical feature, it is a symbol of the timeless, unchanging nature of Egypt itself. The river, like Egypt, is eternal. It has flowed for thousands of years, carrying with it the stories of countless generations, and it will continue to flow long after the monuments and temples have crumbled into dust. The river, like the land, is an eternal witness to history, and as you drift along its surface, you feel the weight of that history pressing down on you. The boat drifts forward, the world around you fading into the distance, and you know that the journey is far from over. The river will carry you forward, and Egypt's story will continue to unfold before you, as eternal and unchanging as the river itself. As the boat drifts further into the southern reaches of Egypt, the landscape changes once more, this time with an even greater intensity. The Nile, which has gently guided you through the fertile plains of the north, seems to intensify its current. Flowing faster, its waters more forceful, as if pulling you deeper into the heart of the land. The riverbanks now are not simply lush with the abundance of life. They are bordered by rugged cliffs and distant hills, where the earth's bones are exposed for all to see. The dry, cracked earth of the desert stretches for miles. Its barren expanse a harsh contrast to the rich, green soil that the river has nourished. This part of Egypt feels raw, untamed, as if the river's journey has reached its most ancient, primal stretch. Here, there are no grand temples, no towering pyramids. Instead, the land speaks of the past in whispers, in the shape of ruins long buried beneath the sands, and in the simple, daily lives of the people who still call this place home. The wind picks up slightly, carrying with it the scent of dust and earth. It's a stark reminder of the fragility of life here. How, without the river, this land would be nothing but desolate rock and sand. Yet the people who live along this stretch of the Nile have learned to survive in this inhospitable landscape, drawing from the river's waters and working with the land's rhythms to sustain themselves. They are not the builders of monumental structures, but they are the keepers of Egypt's soul. The boat continues to glide downstream, the distant hills growing larger as the current becomes stronger, urging you further along this path through Egypt's heart. The quiet is almost palpable. Now, a thick, enveloping silence that seems to stretch for miles. The only sounds are the soft lapping of the water against the boat's sides, the occasional flutter of wings overhead, and the distant cry of birds in the open sky. The world around you feels as though it has stepped out of time, frozen in a moment that has existed for thousands of years. The vast, untouched wilderness of the southern Nile stretches out before you, and you realize that this is the Egypt of the ancients, a place where the great civilizations once flourished and fell, but where the essence of Egypt has always remained, unchanged. The river's course may have altered over the centuries, but the land, the heart of Egypt, remains constant. The boat glides silently forward, and you can't help but marvel at the sheer beauty of this place. The river flows like a ribbon of life through a vast, unforgiving desert, and yet it has nourished countless generations. The people who have lived along the Nile, from the ancient Egyptians to the modern-day villagers, have always been drawn to this lifeblood that flows through the land. And as you float on, you realize that Egypt, in all its complexity, is not just a place, it's a living entity. A fusion of land, water, and people, with a spirit that transcends time. In this part of Egypt, the land feels more untouched, more wild. The riverbanks are not dotted with villages or bustling cities, but with patches of wilderness reeds and papyrus stalks sway gently in the breeze, their delicate fronds catching the soft light of the moon. The silence here is deep, broken, only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant sound of the river's flow. It's almost as if the boat is gliding through a dream, passing through a space that exists between the past and the present. The landscape, though rugged and remote, is strikingly beautiful. The hills rise steeply from the river's edge, their jagged cliffs softened only by the light of the moon. The desert stretches out beyond the river, its golden sands shifting in the night's breeze. And yet, even in this harsh, arid land, life flourishes along the riverbanks. Here the Egyptians built some of their earliest settlements, carving their lives out of the earth and the water in ways that are both simple and profound. The people who live here may not have the grand monuments or the towering structures of the north, but their lives are no less important. They are the descendants of the first Egyptians, the ones who learned to live with the land, to adapt to its rhythms, and to survive in this challenging environment. The boat drifts on, and you feel a sense of gratitude toward these people, those who have lived and worked along the river's banks for thousands of years, whose knowledge of the land and the river has been passed down through the generations. As the boat continues its journey, you feel a deep sense of peace wash over you. The world around you is vast, yet it feels intimate, as if you've entered a space where time has stopped and the land itself is speaking to you. The current of the Nile flows steadily beneath you, carrying you further south, deeper into the heart of Egypt. There is no hurry now, no destination but the journey itself. The boat moves slowly, almost lazily, as if it too is savoring this moment. The stillness of the night is calming, and the soft, rhythmic sound of the water against the boat's hull is like a lullaby, coaxing you into a deeper sense of relaxation. The moon above is bright, casting a pale light over the landscape, and the stars twinkle in the sky, their light reflected in the river below. The desert, with its barren beauty, stretches out in every direction, its golden sands seeming to whisper of the ages past. The hills, jagged and untamed, rise up like silent sentinels, their stone faces watching over the land. It's a moment of serenity, a moment of timelessness, and as you float on, you feel as though you are one with this land, one with the river, one with the past. You pass by a small cluster of homes along the riverbank, simple structures made of mud, brick, and thatch. These homes, though humble, speak to the enduring resilience of the Egyptian people. Life here is simple, but it is rich with meaning. The people who live along the southern Nile have carved out a life from the land, using the river's waters to irrigate their crops, fish in its depths, and sustain their families. These are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, the same people who built the great temples and monuments that still stand today. Their connection to the land and the river is as deep as the water itself, and it is this connection that has allowed Egypt to survive for thousands of years. The boat drifts past these homes, and you realize that the story of Egypt is not just the story of kings and pharaohs, but the story of its people, the farmers, the traders, the fishermen, and the laborers who built and sustained the civilization. From the ground up, the boat continues downstream, the land around you becoming more rugged and wild as you move farther south. The hills rise higher now, their rocky peaks jutting up from the river like the teeth of some ancient beast. The Nile's current is stronger here, its waters moving faster as it carves its path through the desert. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of dust and earth, and the temperature drops slightly as the night grows colder. It's a reminder that Egypt is a land of extremes, fertile and barren, lush and arid, hot and cold. And yet, despite these extremes, life continues, as it always has. The boat moves on, its steady rhythm carrying you toward the unknown, toward the heart of Egypt's ancient story. The boat continues its journey southward, the night growing deeper, the air richer with the scent of the earth and the water. The Nile, like a long, sinuous serpent, winds its way through this timeless land, its banks now even more remote, more intimate in their silence. The boat glides on, the sound of the river lapping against the hull like a soft whisper, a secret shared between the river and the land. The moon, now high in the sky, casts its silvery light over the water, creating a pathway that seems to stretch endlessly into the distance. The night is cool, almost crisp, a refreshing contrast to the heat of the day. You can feel the temperature shift, the desert air growing colder as it moves into the evening, the chill of the night creeping over the river. But there is no discomfort in this. The quiet beauty of the river at night, with its shimmering surface, and the deep silence surrounding it, is more than enough to ease any discomfort. The boat moves forward, and you find yourself lost in the serenity of the moment. The river, stretching for thousands of miles, seems to carry you effortlessly toward a destination that is as old as time itself. You are no longer simply a traveler, moving through space. You are part of the river's flow, part of a timeless cycle that has been repeated for millennia. The river, which has nourished Egypt since the dawn of its civilization, is now carrying you through its heart, through its most ancient, most sacred landscapes. The landscape surrounding you is both stark and beautiful, the vast desert stretching beyond the river's banks in a golden expanse that seems to go on forever. The sand dunes rise and fall like the waves of the sea, their curves soft in the moonlight, casting long dark shadows that stretch across the land. In contrast, the river remains calm, a ribbon of life cutting through the arid land, its surface, gleaming with the moon's reflection. It's a stark reminder of the duality of Egypt to land, where the fertile life of the Nile is separated from the barren desert by the thinnest of lines. The contrast between the lush, life-giving water and the harsh, dry land speaks to the heart of Egypt's existence. It is a land of opposites, a land where life and death coexist in delicate balance, and where every inch of the earth is shaped by the ebb and flow of the river. The river, like the lifeblood of Egypt, pulses with the rhythm of life, moving steadily forward, never halting, never wavering, while the desert waits patiently, a silent observer to the passing of time. The people who have lived along these banks for thousands of years have learned to adapt to this rhythm, learning to work with the land and the river, never against it. Their lives, though simple by the standards of the great cities to the north, are just as intertwined with Egypt's story. As the boat moves south, you realize that this is the Egypt that is most connected to the land. The Egypt of the farmers, the traders, the laborers, those who make their living from the earth and the river, who continue to shape Egypt's future, even as they live in the shadow of its past. As you drift further south, the landscape grows wilder still, and the air around you becomes thicker with the sounds of nature. The chirping of crickets fills the air. The rustling of reeds on the banks of the river adds a faint, almost musical undertone to the night. And occasionally, the screech of an owl can be heard, distant yet piercing. The moonlight casts long, pale shadows across the river, illuminating the land in a way that feels almost dreamlike, as if the river is not simply flowing through time, but through memory. The land here, untouched by the modern world, feels like a place frozen in time, a place where the ancient rhythms of life still hold sway. The boat, moving steadily along the river, feels like a part of that rhythm, a small vessel drifting in the current of history. There are no signs of civilization here, no cities, no monuments. It is just you, the river, and the land, all woven together in a seamless tapestry of existence. You imagine the ancient Egyptians, those who lived and worked along this same river, moving through this same land, their lives shaped by the river's waters, their rituals and beliefs grounded in the land that surrounds them. The desert, though harsh and unforgiving, holds its own beauty, a beauty that speaks to the eternal nature of Egypt. The ancient Egyptians viewed the desert as a place of mystery and power, a place where the gods resided and where the dead would journey after they had passed from the land of the living. The desert, in many ways, was as much a part of Egypt as the Nile itself. And as the boat moves deeper into the southern reaches of Egypt, you can feel that connection to the land, that sense of being a part of something larger, something timeless. The boat drifts past a small collection of huts isolated along the banks of the river. These are the homes of the people who live far from the great cities, far from the temples and the monuments. Yet their lives are just as connected to the land and the river as those of the pharaohs. These people, whose names are not recorded in history, are the true lifeblood of Egypt. They are the farmers who work the land, the fishermen who harvest the river's bounty, the traders who travel up and down the Nile, exchanging goods with distant lands. Their lives may be humble, but they are no less important than those of the kings and queens who built Egypt's grand monuments. As the boat moves past these homes, you realize that the story of Egypt is not just the story of its great rulers and monuments, but the story of the people who lived and worked in the shadows of those grand structures, whose labor and ingenuity made the civilization possible. The river, which flows endlessly from north to south, has carried the stories of these people, along with the stories of the pharaohs, and it will continue to carry them long after the monuments have crumbled and the names of the great rulers have been forgotten. The boat continues south, and as it does, you feel a sense of connection to the land around you, to the river that sustains it, and to the people who have lived along its banks for thousands of years. The current flows steadily beneath you, the sound of the water as calming as a lullaby, and you are carried deeper into Egypt's heart, into its past, into its present, and into its future. The land, the river, and the people are all part of the same story, a story that has been unfolding for millennia and will continue to unfold for as long as the river flows. You were just a fleeting moment in that story, but for now, you are part of it, a small part of the eternal flow of time, moving steadily forward, just like the river itself. The boat moves on, the sound of the water against the hull like a soft whisper, and you are carried with it deeper into the heart of Egypt, deeper into its timeless soul. As the boat continues its slow, deliberate journey down the Nile, the air seems to thicken, becoming heavier with the weight of the history it carries. The river is as still as the moonlight reflecting off its surface, its deep currents barely moving beneath the boat. You sit quietly, your senses heightened, attuned to every sound and sight as the ancient land stretches out before you. The Nile, this lifeblood of Egypt, flows steadily onward, just as it has for millennia, shaping the land, the people, and the very essence of Egyptian civilization. The winds here are warmer, gentler, carrying the scent of the earth and the distant whispers of time. In this moment, there is a deep sense of connection, as though you are not simply a traveler passing through a foreign land, but a participant in an age-old rhythm, a rhythm that has been carried on by the river itself. There is something humbling about being here, something deeply grounding about the presence of this mighty river that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the changing of dynasties, the ebb and flow of history. The boat moves slowly, almost meditatively, through the night, carrying you along a path that has been followed for centuries by countless others. The water gently laps against the sides of the boat, its soft murmur blending with the sounds of the night, the rhythmic sound of the water, the whisper of the wind, and the silence of the desert beyond, all combine to create an atmosphere of peace and stillness. A feeling that you are suspended in time, in a moment that stretches beyond the present and reaches deep into the past. As you float along the river, you notice that the landscape around you begins to change once more. The lush greenery along the banks of the Nile starts to thin, the land gradually giving way to the more rugged, rocky terrain that marks the southern reaches of Egypt. The distant hills, once distant silhouettes on the horizon, now rise up more sharply, their jagged peaks casting long shadows across the river. The desert, once a faint, distant memory, is now encroaching more visibly, its golden sands creeping closer to the water's edge, threatening to overtake the fertile land that has been nourished by the river's annual flooding. The contrast between the lush, life-giving Nile and the barren, arid desert speaks to the delicate balance of life in Egypt. The Nile, with its steady flow, has always been the source of life, the lifeblood of the civilization that arose along its banks. And yet, the land surrounding it is unforgiving. The desert, a reminder of the harsh realities that exist just beyond the river's reach. The ancient Egyptians, in their wisdom, understood this duality. The river was both a source of life and a powerful force that could bring destruction. But it was also something else, a symbol of eternity, a connection to the gods, and a reminder that life and death are inextricably linked. The boat drifts forward, and as it does, the river becomes narrower, the current faster, the land on either side more barren and desolate. The hills, once gentle slopes, now rise steeply from the river's edge, their rocky faces weathered by centuries of wind and sand. The air grows colder here, the chill of the desert night creeping in as the sun sinks lower below the horizon. The river, once calm and peaceful, now seems to take on a more ancient, more powerful presence. You can feel the weight of the past in the air, a sense that the river has seen countless stories unfold along its banks, that it has borne witness to the rise and fall of kings and the lives of ordinary people. It is a river that has connected Egypt for thousands of years, a river that flows not just through the land, but through the very fabric of Egypt's history. It is the heartbeat of the nation, a steady pulse that has sustained the people for generations. You realize that this journey, this boat ride down the Nile, is not just a physical journey, it is a journey through time, a journey that connects you to the past, to the ancient Egyptians who first settled along these banks, and to the people who continue to live here today. As the boat moves further south, the landscape grows wilder and more untamed. The river, once a wide and placid body of water, is now narrow and winding. cutting through jagged cliffs and barren hillsides. The land around you seems to be more inhospitable, the vegetation thinner, and the desert encroaching ever closer. But even in this harsh, arid environment, life persists. The boat passes by small, isolated villages, clusters of simple homes made from mud, brick, and thatch, nestled along the banks of the river. These villages, far removed from the grandeur of Egypt's great cities, seem to exist in a world of their own, a world that remains largely unchanged by the passage of time. The people who live here are not part of the great temples or the pharaoh's court, but they are no less important. Their lives are simple farming, fishing, and trading, but they are essential to the fabric of Egyptian society. Without the labor of the people in these villages, the mighty cities of Egypt would not exist. They are the backbone of the civilization, the workers who tend the land, harvest the crops, and ensure the survival of the kingdom. As you float past these humble villages, you realize that the story of Egypt is not just the story of kings and monuments, but the story of the people who have always lived along the Nile, who have always worked with the land and the river to sustain the civilization. They are the unsung heroes of Egypt, the ones whose contributions have ensured the survival of the country for millennia. The boat continues to glide down the Nile, the current flowing more quickly now as the river narrows, the desert looming on both sides. The landscape is vast and dramatic, with towering cliffs rising above the river, their jagged edges silhouetted against the darkening sky. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of dust and earth, the smell of the desert. The temperature drops as the night deepens and the air becomes still, almost heavy with the weight of time. The stars begin to emerge in the sky, their bright light reflected in the dark waters of the Nile, creating a shimmering path across the river. The silence of the night is broken only by the soft sound of the boat cutting through the water, the gentle lapping of the river against the sides of the boat. You can feel the presence of the land, the history, and the people who have lived here for so long. The Nile is not just a river, it is a part of Egypt's soul, its heart, and its past. And as you float on through the night, you feel as though you are becoming part of that soul, that heart, that past. You are connected to the land and to the river, to the ancient Egyptians and to the people who still live along the Nile today. You are a part of a story that has been unfolding for thousands of years, and you are carried forward by the eternal flow of the Nile as it winds its way through the heart of Egypt, taking you deeper into the land's ancient rhythms and timeless beauty. Asterisk. As the boat continues its journey southward, the once tranquil Nile transforms. The river narrows further, becoming a winding waterway, hemmed in by towering cliffs that rise almost dramatically on either side. These jagged peaks seem to scrape the sky, their sheer faces painted with the warm glow of the setting sun, creating a stark contrast to the dark, eternal flow of the river beneath them. The breeze that once carried the soft hum of the distant reeds now feels heavier, laden with the dry, arid scent of the desert that stretches out into the horizon. The air, once cool and refreshing, is now tinged with the heat of the day that refuses to fully release its grip, as though it is not quite ready to surrender to the approaching coolness of night. The desert, so close now, looms large, encroaching on the fertile land that the Nile so graciously nurtures. It feels as if you are moving into a world more ancient than any before, a place where time itself slows down, the moments stretched and elongated by the rhythm of the river. The land here speaks in whispers, the silence broken only by the occasional rustling of the river's surface as the boat glides along. The only sounds you hear now are the soft, steady pulse of the current, the gentle creak of the boat, and the occasional call of a bird flying high above. It's as though the world is holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. Yet, as the boat drifts along, you realize that nothing needs to break the silence. The stillness itself is its own kind of magic, its own kind of story. The river, flowing onward with its eternal motion, is the storyteller, speaking of the past, of time, of all those who have traveled these waters before you. The way the light plays on the water, casting ripples that shimmer like ancient hieroglyphs, is a testament to the secrets it holds, secrets of dynasties, of temples, of gods, and of kings. This river, which stretches for thousands of miles, has witnessed it all, and yet it moves forward, unaffected by time, carrying with it the echoes of every soul that has ever lived by its banks. The boat moves steadily, its quiet progression through the water giving you a sense of peace. As you pass the rocky cliffs, you can see traces of human habitations, small caves, humble dwellings etched into the face of the hills, a stark reminder of how the ancient Egyptians adapted to their environment. The harsh desert and towering mountains would be enough to deter many, but not the Egyptians. They carved out their lives in this unforgiving landscape, finding ways to survive and thrive in a land that seemed bent on rejecting them. These small cave dwellings, now abandoned, once housed people who lived at the edge of the known world, relying on the bounty of the Nile to sustain them. Their lives, though unremarkable in the grand sweep of history, were important nonetheless. These were the people who fished in the river's depths, who grew the crops that fed the kingdom, who walked the very same shores you now drift along. Their story, though often lost to the sands of time, is no less significant than that of the great pharaohs and their monumental structures. These small lives are part of the greater fabric of Egypt's history, and you, floating on this river, are now a part of that same story. You imagine them, those early Egyptians who lived in these caves and along the riverbanks, working the land, tending the livestock, watching the sun rise and set over the same waters you now drift upon. They, too, were connected to the land in a way that modern civilization struggles to understand. The ancient Egyptians understood that the Nile was more than just a river. It was a sacred, life-giving force, a connection to the gods, to eternity. And as the boat moves on, you can't help but feel that same connection, a thread that links you to all those who have lived and loved and worked along this river for thousands of years. The moon begins to rise higher in the sky, casting its silvery light across the water. The night is deepening, the stars twinkling brightly above, their light reflected in the river's surface, creating a glittering trail that seems to stretch on forever. The world around you feels vast and silent, as though it's holding its breath in anticipation of something. The boat continues to glide effortlessly through the water, its steady motion breaking the stillness. But it feels as if the river itself is carrying you into a dream, into a place where time has no meaning and the past and present coexist in harmony. The moonlight dances on the water, casting long shadows on the cliffs that rise on either side, their faces etched with the passage of time. The landscape is both desolate and beautiful, a place where life and death are woven together into a tapestry of existence. The desert, with its vast emptiness, seems to stretch out beyond the river, a stark reminder of how fragile life is in this harsh land. But even in the midst of the desert's harshness, there is beauty found in the simplicity of the land, in the way the light plays on the rocks, in the shadows that stretch across the river. The boat moves on, carrying you deeper into this timeless land, and you feel a sense of awe, a sense of wonder at how this river, this ancient lifeline, has sustained the people of Egypt for millennia. The current, though gentle, carries you forward, and you realize that this journey, like the river itself, has no end. It is a journey of discovery, of connection, of understanding. You are not simply traveling through Egypt's past. You are part of that past, and it is part of you. As the boat continues down the river, the landscape becomes even more dramatic. The hills that line the riverbanks rise sharply, their jagged peaks casting long, dark shadows across the water. The air grows colder now, the desert's chill creeping in as the sun dips lower below the horizon. The night is coming, and with it, the stillness that only the desert can bring. The boat moves silently, as though it too is part of the land, part of the timeless rhythm of the Nile. The water is calm, the current steady, and for a moment, it feels as though the river is carrying you not just through space, but through time itself. You realize that this journey, this quiet passage down the Nile, is a journey of the soul. It is a reminder that we are all part of something greater, something ancient and eternal. The river, like time, flows onward, never stopping, never wavering. And as you drift along its waters, you are carried with it, a small part of Egypt's vast and eternal story. The boat moves on, and the silence deepens, the land around you stretching out in all directions. The river, though narrow here, seems to hold an endless expanse of time within it. The story of Egypt is written in the waters, in the land, in the people who have lived and worked here for millennia. As the boat glides silently down the Nile, you feel a sense of peace, a sense of connection to the past, to the land, and to the river. The moon shines brightly overhead, and the stars twinkle in the clear desert sky. The boat moves forward, the current guiding you along the path that has been traveled for thousands of years. And as you float through this timeless land, you realize that, just like the river, your journey is eternal, carried forward by the flow of time.